Welcome to Culture Talk. This is the segment of our show where we discuss culturally relevant topics and how it relates to evangelism. I'm Daniel Almaguer, and today I'm joined by Tim Boyle. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
I understand you were a missionary in Japan for many years. Share about your experience with that.
Well, I first went as a missionary in 1971 as a short-term 3-year missionary, and then went to seminary after that, and then went back in 1982 as full-time and retired in 2016. So that adds up 37 years there, and then lots of time before and after as well.
Wow. So you're born and raised here in America, and then you went over there, and wow. So how was the culture shock? How was the differentiation of culture once you arrived there versus how it was here in America?
Well, of course, any time you go into a new culture like that, it's so exotic and seems everything is new and whatever. And I don't know that I really experienced that much culture shock the first time going over. There was certain instances like that. I think that it's interesting, there's also reverse culture shock when you come back to your own culture. And after being there for those 3 years, when I came back that first time, that is what actually stood out in my mind the most, is the reverse culture shock.
Really?
Coming back into America.
Yeah.
And then now I go back and forth and I don't experience that, but the first time I did.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So how would you say that the cultural climate has changed over the years and how it is today versus how it was when you first arrived in Japan?
Yeah, of course I first arrived in 1968 as a student. And this was not that long after the war and stuff, but it's certainly there have been massive changes in Japanese society from pre-war and to early post-war like that.
Right.
So that would be vastly changed. As far as how it's changed since then, the last 50 some odd years, I think that the young people are becoming more and more westernized in a lot of ways, and both positive and negative.
Okay.
Westernized in the sense of, it's traditionally a shame culture and group-oriented culture. Nowadays, it's not as strongly that. It's more, I wouldn't say it's a guilt culture by any means, but it's at least the individualism stuff plays out more strongly now than it used to.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. So how would you say, or what's the predominant religion that's there today in Japan?
Well, materialism, of course.
Oh, very nice. Just like here.
Yeah, right.
It seems that way.
But I mean, traditionally, Japan it was called Shinto. It's the way of the gods, if you translate it into English. But it's an animistic religion that was from ancient times. And that's still sort of the base. And then Buddhism came into Japan in around 700 AD or so. And for the first, several centuries, it was very much just a religion of the elite and not the culture, not the average person. It actually is interesting because in the mid-1500s, when the Jesuit priests first came into Japan and it had its exposure to Western Christianity, which is connected with colonialism, this sort of stuff. Even though it grew rapidly at first, the Japanese government decided to, because they associated with colonialism, they used Buddhism to suppress the Christianity, and that's how Buddhists became. Japanese as a whole became Buddhists.
Yeah, interesting.
And now they consider themselves both. The Shinto is for traditions having to do with celebration, marriage, this sort of stuff, and then the Buddhist has to do with death and memorial services, that kind of thing.
Okay, I see.
So it's kind of bifurcated.
Yeah. So Tim, another question I have is, for anyone traveling to Japan for missions, what's something that they should be prepared to address when in the missions field?
Of course, it depends on what kind of work they're going to be doing.
Right.
A lot of young people go over there to teach English in schools and whatever. And so the language part, because learning Japanese takes a long time.
Right.
And so it's not something that you can just you pick up overnight. And so if you're talking about really reaching the people in their language and in their culture, that takes a lot of preparation to be able to do. But there's still a lot of work that's really necessary and helpful. It's sort of backing up the career missionaries with a lot of short-term people. And they're just developing relationships with individuals and really getting to have a trust relationship develop. That's certainly very important. Right. When it comes to communicating the gospel message, I think one thing that's important to realize is that they're in a group-oriented shame culture. And so that if you have a very Western style, or using Western theology kind of categories and stuff like that, sin and that kind of thing, it doesn't really communicate very well.
Okay.
Because they don't have the background to really understand what you are trying to say.
Gotcha.
And so I think reading up on the cultural differences and how that works is helpful to know, when you're going to communicate with people.
Yeah. So what do you think would be the best way to transition from that relationship that once they build the trust, to kind of migrate into more of like a gospel, to teach the gospel?
Well, it depends if you're doing this in a classroom type setting, or if you're doing an individual, where you have a friendship and they're just, obviously if it's that latter, you want to be able to see what are the issues they're dealing with, what are their felt needs, and then have a way of tying the gospel message to that, as opposed to just simply a formula that you have and you just simply present it, whether it's something relevant to them or not. It's a matter of perception, because even if it's a relevant message, if they don't perceive it that way,
right,
then you don't get anywhere.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yes. So, can you offer any final words of encouragement for anyone who's thinking about maybe missions in Japan or going overseas to spread the gospel?
Well, if you're interested in that, just kind of exploring that. For instance, there are a lot of opportunities for teaching English in various contexts. I mean, English is a very important part of their education, and it's one of the things that it's kind of like they study about English, but they don't really learn it because they don't have a live native speaker that they're interacting with. And so
right.
that aspect there is an opportunity of just developing relationships with people.
Yeah, so just really in the day-to-day speaking English with them and helping them learn more of like the style and the dialogue of English would be helpful.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. So Tim, do you have any personal websites or anything for people who want to learn more about you or your time in Japan?
Well, yes, I have a bilingual website I put together quite a few years ago that has articles that are from reasons.org and with the Japanese translations, with an English page and a Japanese page.
Oh,
and then
nice.
I have some of my personal, sermons and other things that are on there as well.
That's perfect. Well, again, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to learn more about Tim, you can come to our website on reasons.org and just search Tim Boyle.